Second chances are for everyone. A Lord of the Rings Harry Potter crossover fic by Solitary Bird. Read for you by Solitary Bird. This fic is rated T for all the elves fighting each other over getting to parent Harry. Harry just stares up at the crowd of adult elves that are arguing and sighs before making his way out of the room. Today's been a really weird day. 1 second he was in a magical explosion, then he was falling backwards through a weird veil, and then he was lying in a bed with cold flannels being pressed to his forehead by giants. For a while he had thought of all of this was some sort of weird dream orchestrated by the painkillers the St. Mungo's staff or Madame Pomfrey probably had him on. But then he'd fallen out of bed and banged his knees on the hard wooden floor, and he hadn't woken up somewhere he recognised, and these strange people hadn't gone away either. More of them had come, dabbing his bleeding knees with soft swabs covered in medicine that had stinged something terrible. They'd given him something that looked like soup, and then, when his fever broke, they had brought him to this room, with no explanation, and started shouting at one another. Apparently, everyone seems desperate to adopt him, and that's a concept that Harry is still entirely too dazed to fully take on, when he's also coming to the rapid conclusion that this might not be the drug-induced weird dream that he had imagined them to be. He has no idea why several fully grown adults are almost brawling in a small room filled with decorative ceramic knickknacks placed on impractical pedestals. Something expensive sounding crashes to the floor just as he rams the door into the corridor beyond, followed quickly by a shout of, "That was a gift from Thranduil!" They were behaving like a box full of angry Kneazles. It wasn't particularly helping Harry deal with his rising sense of panic. "Where are you going, little one?" asked the door guard. Harry hadn't noticed when they had carried him into the room earlier. Harry almost jumped out of his skin, completely unable to think of a lie that wouldn't have him thrown back in there with a load of physically brawling adults. "It's rather noisy in there," the guard said, looking in at the whirlwind of destruction that was happening disapprovingly. It looked as though he had half a mind to go in there, but instead he takes Harry's hand and pulls him gently down the corridor and into a small office where a tired-looking elf with long dark hair was sitting at a desk surrounded by papers. He looked more stressed than Hermione during their 3rd year at Hogwarts. Harry felt very bad that they were disturbing him from what looked like a horrendous amount of paperwork. "I'm so sorry to disturb you, Aresta. They're fighting pretty badly in there, and there was no one with a clear enough head to watch the child. I need to go break things up before someone actually gets hurt." "They're fighting in front of the child?" This Aresta asks, looking at the same time intensely annoyed at the sheer lack of child safety they're showing, and glad to have a good excuse not to have anything to do with the mess of papers that are now slowly sliding their way onto the floor. "Unfortunately," the guard sighed. His eyes follow the movement of the paper as it slowly starts to form a pile on the ground. "Go try your best to prevent another kinslaying," Aresta sighed, neatly sidestepping the papers to kneel down in front of Harry. "I'll do my best, but I am making no promises," the guard laughed before leaving, closing the door after himself and cutting off what Harry thought was probably a really obscure swear word by the look on Aresta's face. "Never say that word," Aresta said. "It's very bad, and you are too young to know what it means." Harry smiled, nodding. "Have you had dinner yet?" "I had soup. It tasted bad." "I think that was probably medicine. What do you think about going to get something to eat that tastes nicer than yucky medicine?" The door opened again, and Harry expected to see the guard who had brought him here or one of the angry people that had been fighting, but instead there was a rather snooty-looking female elf standing in the door. She's rude to Aresta about the papers being on the floor, and she basically says some mean shit to Aresta saying he shouldn't be left with a kid. Harry bites her leg. They leave because Aresta is too old to put up with this shit, and he could destroy her. He's just choosing to play nice, and Harry can see that. You can also see, as they move through the place, that people treat Aresta weirdly, but so far he's actually been the nicest person in this place. Harry's a pretty good judge of adults, what with all the crazy evil ones he's met so far. Aresta feels a lot like Lupin, but without the crippling self-confidence issues. Harry is starting to get tired the longer that they walk. He falls further and further behind until he loses sight of Aresta entirely. This place he's walking up in is so much larger than he had originally thought. The buildings all clung to the side of a valley, crisscrossed by bridges slung between them. and the river far below. Harry stops to rest a while. There's no way that his little legs will be able to catch up to Arrestor's long ones. Eventually he'll realise that Harry's missing and come back for him, so he takes a little time to look around. Little sparkles of light draw his attention from the river and the way the sun hits the water as it flows by. He didn't realise just quite how close to the edge he'd wandered until Arrestor pulls him up into his arms, the older elf's heartbeat racing from the spot where his face is smushed into his chest. His eyes are wild too when Harry manages to wiggle his head free enough to look up. It reminded him of Sirius. "Don't you dare stand so close to the edge, little one. You could have fallen down there and gotten hurt." Harry notices the tremble of fear in Arrestor's voice, but he wondered why he seemed to care so much about him. "I wouldn't have gotten hurt," Harry said matter-of-factly. Arrestor tries to reassure him that he would in fact have gotten injured very badly, and it would have hurt a lot, but Harry interrupts him in return. "I wouldn't have gotten hurt." He doubles down. "I would have died. I've already done that before, and it didn't hurt that bad." If it was possible for an elf to turn entirely grey in hue, Arrestor would have managed to do so. "Well, on that note, little one, I think we definitely need to go see Glorfindel about that picnic." Arrestor carried him the rest of the way, despite Harry's embarrassingly weak protests at being carried around like a sack of potatoes. It was undignified, and he absolutely did not find it comforting even one little bit to be carried so. Not one bit. Once they finally made it to Arrestor's chosen destination, he had to admit, if only internally, that there was no way that he would have been able to walk this far without being carried by someone. They stepped through a series of complicated arches that eventually lead out into a little flower meadow, complete with clematis winding its way up the rock face. There is another elf here. They must be the Glorfindel Arrestor had spoken about before. Their back was to them, and they had bright golden hair. "My love, you've finally arrived," Glorfindel booms, straightening out the picnic blanket he has brought. Then he turns, and his smile is just as bright as his hair, just as golden, and it's easy to see how someone could fall in love with him. Arrestor is beaming. The worry Harry had sparked in him seems almost entirely washed away, merely by being in the presence of him. When they hug one another in greeting, Harry gets squished in between them. It's nice. It makes him wonder if his parents ever did something similar, but he'd never know because they were gone, and now there was no way of asking Sirius or Remus. Tears fall from Harry's eyes, and they notice. "Oh dear, are we squashing you too much? Did we hurt you?" Arrestor exclaims. "Blame me, little one," Glorfindel jokes. "I just got too excited for hugs." "I'm not little," Harry insists, because he's sick of being called Lil, even if right now he's kind of trapped in a little kid's body. "Command her, General." Glorfindel salutes, and Arrestor begins laughing. "How should Glorfindel, Captain of the Guard of Imladris, address you, General?" It was maybe the stupidest thing anyone had said to him the entire time that he'd been here, but unlike the adults that were perhaps still punching each other, Glorfindel was funny. Both of these random elves were already doing a much better job at looking after him so far. "I don't remember," Harry lied. There was no way that they would think his name was a normal name here in a world with names like any that he had heard so far. "That's okay," Arrestor said, finally putting him down on the ground. "I'm sure you'll remember when you're feeling better. What food did you bring for us, my dear? I fear my temporary charge has had nothing to eat today but medicinal soup." Glorfindel visibly shuddered before rushing to show them the food. "There are a great many good things in this basket. I even have one of your favourite strawberry tarts." The way that they speak is a little odd, Harry thinks, as they sort of stare intensely at one another as he takes a seat on the blanket. They do that for such a long time that Harry just starts serving himself food from the basket shamelessly, and has come to the conclusion that at least some elves must be able to use legitimacy. He just waits patiently, snacking on whatever flavour thing this pastry he had in his hands was supposed to be. At first Harry had thought it was chocolate flavour because it was brown and sweet, but the more he chewed, the more bean-like it tasted to his horror. "Just spit it out if you don't like it," Arrestor said, offering Harry a handkerchief to spit it out into. Harry shook his head, forcing himself to finish it. "It's bad to waste food," Harry says, "because there are things about living with the Dursleys that you don't just unlearn merely by dying. Honestly, he's eaten things a lot worse than sweet bean-filled pastry, and he shouldn't really be complaining at all because they let him eat first, and Glorfindel didn't really know that there was going to be some weird-ass child third-wheeling their date. He's staying with me for a while until the council comes to a decision about who he'll be staying with, until he remembers his name or anything about his family. That'll be a long time because they were punching each other when I left, Harry said. Glorfindel laughed. Even Lord Elrond? He asked with amusement sparkling in his eyes. I don't remember which one that is. There had been an almost endless parade of elves with names like Lord Caladben and Lady Bronadis, and as much as Harry wanted to learn about this world and the people in it, how many people was he supposed to remember? Elrond is the one with the stress wrinkles on his forehead, and he tends to wear clothes with 8 pointed stars sewn into them, Glorfindel joked. Harry pointed towards Aresta, who was currently drinking something from a flask. But he is called Aresta. Aresta choked on a mouthful of strawberry tart. You're strong enough to tell Morgoth to go suck his own appendage, but a kid saying you have wrinkles almost kills you? Glorfindel questioned, almost bending double as he laughed. Luckily, Glorfindel knew the Heimlich maneuver because there was no way that Harry was strong enough to do it himself in this body. Why don't you go play for a bit? Aresta asked, but it was a sort of suggestion that adults make when they want you to do something that's at least 6 feet away from them. Harry just kind of stared at them, not knowing what to do. He sits underneath the magnolia and watches bugs that are crawling on it until he hears another argument happening. He's sort of scared that it's Aresta and Glorfindel fighting because they have to supervise/babysit him and not do whatever elves do on dates. There's a ladybird currently eating a green fly right in front of him. Best pretend this is the coolest thing he's ever seen and that he's enraptured in it. That way he can listen in on the fight before getting pulled into it. Or running away. Running away is always an option. There's a little staircase that descends down from the meadow to the river below. You had no right, gets screamed by someone who is giving off strong Cornelius Fudge vibes from even this distance. And despite Harry trying to listen in acutely to someone calling Aresta a kinslayer, someone manages to sneak up behind him. He can hear Mad Eye's complaints about Harry's lapsing awareness even now. Harry freezes solid as all the hairs on the back of his neck stand up mere seconds before they grab hold of him. A piercing scream fills the meadow, and the elves from all over Imladris come running. A child is scared or hurting. An elfling is in danger. Harry goes limp, laying like a dead body to make himself harder to lift, harder to carry away, but he's too small for it to be very effective. He starts thrashing and clawing and biting, kicking his legs violently, hoping to contact something that would be painful. They drop him, and he has just enough luck that he rolls down the hidden staircase and lands in the river. Aresta takes a flying leap and jumps in after him. Luckily, the river is swelled by spring rains and is deep enough. Unluckily, the river is fast-flowing, and Harry, with his very basic swimming skills, is struggling to keep his head above the water. Aresta is a much stronger swimmer, and he soon manages to gather Harry in his arms. Harry stops screaming. He feels safe now, and screaming only lets more water into his mouth, even though there is still a lot that can go wrong. It doesn't, though. They are swept to a shallow ford, where Glorfindel is waiting for them, holding towels in one hand and pulling them both out of the water with the other. He wraps them gently in the towels, and other people appear higher up on the path, leading back up to the river. The same person who had tried to grab Harry at the picnic spot tries to make another attempt, but a drenched and furious Aresta grabs hold of them and starts dragging them by their collar back to the group of other people who bristle but are too scared to stop him. Glorfindel is trying to comfort and dry Harry, but he starts throwing up river water. I almost drowned in a lake before, Harry murmurs between retches. Oh, says Glorfindel, who was rubbing his back in a soothing manner. They tried to make me choose who wouldn't drown, but I chose. He passed out. When he wakes up this second time, it's in the same bed, but Aresta is sat at his side doing paperwork at a small desk that Harry doesn't quite remember being there before. The papers look complicated even from this angle. There seems to be a lot of maths involved. Rolling over in bed proves to be a bad idea when he immediately throws up directly onto the floor and starts crying. But there isn't the harsh words that he's come to dread. He's not being forced to clean it up himself. Instead, Aresta is there, and he wipes up his vomit and Harry's face. He brings water for Harry to rinse out of his mouth with, and he helps him find a comfy place to sit, and he sings a song that helps him feel not quite so miserable. You have certainly had quite a day, haven't you, my little dove? Aresta says. I brought you a bucket if you need to get sick again. Let's put it here next to you by the bedside, and then you can be sick into that. Aresta goes to get Lord Elrond, who looks like he might have been dragged through a bush or two on his way here because his braids and all of his robes are askew. He'd definitely been part of the fight then, Harry thought, full of war. He's examined by Elrond, and all he says is that Harry might feel uncomfortable because he swallowed a lot of water earlier, and it might want to come up when he lays flat. So let's sleep sitting propped up a little, just for tonight, he promises. Aresta and Glorfindel are going to stay with him for now, and that person isn't going to come back, except they do in the middle of the night when they probably think that Harry will be unattended and sleeping. But he isn't. Glorfindel is sitting by his bedside, filling out some sort of report by candlelight, and Aresta is sleeping in the chair at the side of his bed. Harry is awake, though, feeling rather sleepy, awake enough to shout, "Fuck off!" at the intruder and startle his current guardians. They look rather shocked before finally recapturing the weirdo. Harry ends up living with Aresta and Glorfindel in their little house, and they all lived happily ever after. The end. Thank you for listening.